Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and today it's another episode of 5 horror movies you probably have never heard of. Now before we begin, I do want to make a quick announcement. For those of you that are familiar with my channel and familiar with my scoring system in particular, I have launched the rottedreviews.com website, which does have now a table including links to all the movies I've ever reviewed, including their scores in a searchable, sortable format. Put a lot of work into it. It's available rottedreviews.com. It works on desktop and it works on mobile. It's something I'm quite proud of, and it's a nice little it's a fun little thing to kind of browse through and sort by best intention or sort by worst overall, things like that. So give it a look if you want. I highly encourage it. So moving on. Up first today, Mr. Frost, 1990. A cool and collected mass killer allows himself to be caught and cuffed, spending several years in the care of mental institutions and refusing to speak. One day he gets transferred and meets his new doctor. Now the real fun begins. This is a movie that I had really, really high hopes for. It started out extraordinarily strong. The reason I picked it was because it had Jeff Goldblum in it in a period of time before Jurassic Park, but after Earth Girls Are Easy. And I really wanted to kind of see what performance he would deliver. And I would say, on the whole, a very fantastic one. But I think that ultimately this entire movie, including his performance, was a big missed opportunity. The way that this movie sets things up really feels Hitchcockian. It feels like I'm watching almost a version of The Rope. It does have an overly confident, cocky mass murderer.
Didn't like the model?
They said they found a body inside.
Oh, yeah, the body. Yeah, I was just finishing burying it when you showed up.
That's just the sort of answer I was expecting.
What do you mean? What do you think, I'm kidding?
If you're not, then we don't have the same sense of humor.
Well, why did he allow himself to get caught? Why is he so cool and collected about this? Another aspect of this movie is he doesn't have any identity. He's not, listed anywhere. He doesn't have a name. He's not speaking. He doesn't have identification. His fingerprints aren't matching for anything. And this was a time before DNA was really, a viable, feasible thing, which is interesting with the Jurassic Park thing coming up. But regardless, it was interesting from a cool and collected killer kind of standpoint, playing mind games with detectives or the doctors at the mental institutions and so on and so forth. I was on board for that. I really like that aspect of things. I love the idea of somebody that's not afraid to get caught, but more afraid to be found out on, not necessarily a what, but a why level. Somebody that is guarded and simply just wants to not necessarily be known, but to be known. And I don't know, that cat and mouse thing I really enjoy, and I had, like I said, high hopes for this one. But ultimately what it wound up doing was, instead of going that route that it started down, it wound up going a route entirely of supernatural lore and implying that Jeff Goldblum's character of Mr. Frost was in fact Satan, and the mind games that he was playing was in fact more soul games than anything else.
Did you believe in me? And that I'm stronger than passing time?
Stronger than passing time. Haven't you understood this yet? This devil idea is hopelessly out of date. It's a faded image. This is a century that belongs to science.
It was a lost opportunity, and I think that the scores here are going to reflect that. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. I think nothing really gets affected by this missed opportunity more than the intent, and I think rightly so. The script wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. The acting performances were probably the best part of this. Jeff Goldblum does turn in a quality performance as Mr. Frost, even if I thought the character was underutilized. And the doctor that he winds up speaking to was played by Kathy Baker, who does a pretty good job in and of her own right. But it wasn't enough to save this movie. It wasn't enough to save it from the plot and the hole that it had dug for itself. So ultimately, it wound up with a place of 43 out of 100 points, and it's not really a movie that I would fully recommend. Helen Keller versus Nightwolves, 2015. A flashback story within a movie directed by fictional St. James Street James tells the true story of Helen Keller as she adapts to becoming blind and deaf by a nightwolf attack that also killed her parents. Can she overcome her loss of senses and regain her courage in time for the final onslaught? All right. Okay, here we go. So 132 views on Letterboxd, and I think that for a 2015 movie to only have 132 views, it's, I would qualify it as fairly unknown. This was directed by Ross Peterson, who also made the movie FDR American Badass. This is just silliness through and through. I mean, that's one of the reasons you don't pick Helen Keller versus Nightwolves because you're expecting a quality cinematic experience or a drama for the ages. You pick it because it's fucking silly. And you know what? On that note, this movie really delivered.
Mom. Are you okay?
Oh, yes. I'll be fine. Oh, dinner will be a little late, though.
Honestly, the silliness and the campiness imbued within this movie rivals that of Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. However, from a critical standpoint, I do have to admit that it fails to capture the charm, the wit, or the consistent levels of humor of Dude Bro Party Massacre 3. Now, the one thing that this movie had going for it was the acting performances. There were two major names that made me want to pick this movie above anything else: Lynn Shay and Barry Bostwick. And you can tell that both of them, and the entire cast, had a blast making this stupid, stupid movie.
See, spot, run.
I mean, why are we even learning Braille anyway? We're like 30.
I'm gonna slap your teeth right out of your face.
And in the fun that they have on screen, it kind of translates through. I had fun watching them have fun, more than anything else. I mean, certainly not the storyline, but just the performances that they were putting on. Everything about this was anachronistic. It just felt, the dialogue was totally out of place for the period of time and so forth, but that was ultimately the point. It's the point of, you have a character where a night wolf is attacking them by having stock footage of a wolf and then having somebody off screen literally throw a stuffed animal at them.
Hey guys, as pissed as I am about dinner, this is happening right now.
Run, you guys. I'll cover you.
Things like that. I mean, it's silliness and it's campiness to the nth degree. When it goes to in town, it basically shows like a small town diner. It's just that level of, well, we can't really recreate a real small town of this era, so fuck it, we're just going to go ahead and show a diner and let the humor speak for itself. And for the most part, it worked. Lynn Shay as the elder Helen Keller telling the story to her grandchildren just had an absolute romp making this. Everybody involved, especially, I would say, Lynn Shay and Barry Bostwick, had an absolute ball, and it's infectious. I'm going to absolutely admit that I enjoyed this movie. But the scores here are going to kind of reflect the actual true nature of it. I mean, as far as the plot goes, what plot? It's just silliness, campiness all through and through. You have an imminent night wolf attack happening, and they're talking about, what type of oranges or kumquats or so forth to use for the duck l'orange that Barry Bostwick made. It's not a quality written movie. And the acting, as much fun as they had, this was a tough one to judge because a lot of it felt like a lot of ad-libbing. A lot of it felt like just a lot of silliness, basically just trying to eke out a solid take of dialogue between laughing fits. And how do you really judge that? I don't think that that's really worthy of phenomenal acting scores, but I still have to appreciate the stuff that they did deliver on screen that did make me laugh, I fully admit.
They're here. They're among us. When they want blood, they take it, plain and simple. They prey on people's weaknesses. I was terrible at backgammon. They knew that.
And the technical, that was another one that was tough to judge because obviously this was campy and stupid, and that was the point of it. But how much do you really award somebody for a night wolf attack where they're throwing stuffed animals at the actors? It's a tough balance, and ultimately the one category that I had to really dump all the points into was intent, because this was supposed to make me laugh, and against my better judgment, it made me laugh. So I would actually recommend this movie. I find myself surprised as anybody else, but I did enjoy this. I thought it was fun. I thought it was funny. It would be best in a group of friends. If you're watching it solo, there's going to be some good chuckle moments. There might even be some laugh out loud moments. I had to pause at a few certain points there to allow myself to laugh before, continuing on, because I was missing some dialogue. But I do think that with friends is the best way to watch Helen Keller versus Nightwolves. Gothic Harvest, 2018. A group of friends in New Orleans during Mardi Gras get separated when one of them runs off with a stranger at a bar. The attempt to find their friend shows them some of the mysticism of the area and the terrible secrets of an impossibly old family. Directed by Ashley Hamilton, the previous movie of Helen Keller vs. Nightwolves, the two major reasons that I picked it was Lynn Shay and Barry Bostwick, and in this case, it was Lynn Shay and Bill Moseley. When I saw that they were together in a movie that only had 38 views, I had to include it in this list. It was almost just a moral imperative. And I'm very sad to announce that ultimately this movie just didn't work at all. This is an otherwise potentially interesting script that was unfortunately marred with stilted dialogue, hammy characters, bad pacing, and absolutely no skill at developing any level of terror whatsoever. Which I guess makes it more of an interesting concept that is just marred by a bad script. Now, I'm sorry if I sound too awful harsh. I don't want to, but I'm sure that ship has sailed. But I honestly was a bit disappointed by this. I thought that the concept was interesting, and the fact that they actually managed to get two iconic actors on board would have yielded some better results. And ultimately, it was just really deflating and disappointing. More than anything, it was boring, and that's about the last thing that a film should be, especially a terrifying movie set in New Orleans with this potentially interesting mythos and these two actors on board and so forth. The last thing that the movie should have been was boring, but I found myself checking out of it multiple times and having to kind of force myself to stick with it through to the end credits.
What about me, mistress? Will I age?
Yes, you will age, but you will never die.
Nothing about it was terrifying, nothing about it was terribly interesting, and the characters of Griselda and Detective Hollis, played by Lynn Shay and Bill Moseley respectively, were a bit just underutilized and poorly written. And the notion of having those two actors be a part of your movie and never actually get them together on the screen at the same time interacting with one another really felt like a missed opportunity. Considering how close they got, it wouldn't have been too awful difficult of a rewrite. If you had your script laid out and then at the last minute, oh my God, we actually got these two? Okay, well, let's just refine things a little bit and actually put them in the same room together. It would have been incredibly easy for that to happen, but they didn't really make that. I don't know if shooting schedule or what. It was just deflating, disappointing, and a missed opportunity all around. And unfortunately, with the score of 23 out of 100 points, I absolutely cannot recommend 2018's Gothic Harvest. Dreamland, 2019. A hitman is assigned the task of removing the pinky finger of a once famous junkie jazz musician, setting off a chain of events leading to a bizarre wedding between a vampire and a 14-year-old girl sold by a pimp. All right, now this is a movie that I desperately wanted to talk about. Directed by Bruce McDonald of Pontypool fame, also starring Stephen McHattie of Pontypool fame. This only had 165 views on Letterboxd, and I think it deserves to really be seen because I enjoyed the shit out of it. Now, I thought about actually giving this its own standalone review apart from the 5 horror movies you probably have never heard of format here, but I also don't want this format to just kind of turn into the waste bin of movies that don't deserve its own standalone review, but I do want to talk about this one. I think ultimately it's going to be very divisive. This is a movie that you're either going to absolutely love or absolutely hate. There's not going to be a whole lot of in between. Pontypool had the benefit of being a very right on the surface level, in your face kind of interesting zombie movie that just took place in an isolated, insulated environment while the terrible stuff was happening outside, and then watching it slowly eke in. So even without the allegory of the impact of words being infectious, let's just say, that had that allegorical symbolism kind of other realm to it, but if you didn't want to get into that, you could still enjoy it on that zombie movie esque thing. And this, This is just allegory and symbolism through and through. And if it's not going to be something that you want to really dissect and be a bit introspective about, you're probably not going to enjoy it nearly as much as I did. This is a movie that is full, chock full of vague era European noir visual style, sharp as a razor dialogue, and stellar performances by all involved, especially Stephen McHattie playing both the hitman and the jazz musician, but also a big shout out to Henry Rollins playing the pimp named Hercules.
It's a message. It's a message to everyone out there. Things can get nasty again, is my message. Got it? You're the messenger.
Now, I've seen some people complain that this movie is a bit slow, and personally, I didn't find it to be that at all. There was a lot of dialogue. This is a very dialogue-heavy movie, but it sold so well in the acting performances, especially by Stephen McHattie, that it didn't bother me. I didn't think it was slow. I just enjoyed what I was watching. Now, I don't want to give away the farm on this movie because I do think it does deserve to be seen, but there are when I say that there's a lot of allegory and symbolism in there, what I mean is that there are clear connections between characters that don't ever really get fully fleshed out. There is just the noir visual style has a lot of triggers and cues and so forth in it that made me research it afterward. By the time this was over, I was doing research. I was looking up things on the fact that there's Arabic writing, I believe Arabic writing, next to the English writing of the credits scrolling, followed it up with foreign language writing. So I was looking into things like Arabic afterlife, and I was looking into the mythical backstory of what cultures had historical reverence for the pinky finger, even. This had me really doing a lot of research to try and find a lot of hidden meanings within this movie, and I'm not afraid to say that I came up completely dry. There was a lot of this that I do not understand, and I know a lot of people that watch movies such as this have trouble saying that. I really don't. I appreciate it, I loved it, but I don't fully understand it. And that's the kind of thing where it gets stuck in my brain. It's a splinter in my brain that what I want more than anything else, two things: to talk to other people that have seen this, to kind of dissect it, and just see, theorize and so forth. And then also, I would love the opportunity to sit down with Bruce McDonald himself and really discuss the elements of this movie, the symbolism behind a lot of the elements to it. It's one that really makes you think. It's one that really sticks with you afterward. And on that level, I would absolutely recommend Dreamland 2019. Now, again, I think this is the kind of movie where it's going to be extraordinarily divisive. Either you're really going to love it or you're going to outright hate it. And fortunately, I found myself in the former category, and I would love to hear from you. If you've seen 2019's Dreamland, please leave comments below. Let me know what you thought. I would love to have a discussion on this, or look me up on Twitter. That'd be a great way. I post a lot of horror movie stuff on there and just kind of my daily general thoughts on there. So that would be a great platform to discuss 2019's Dreamland. Now, before I introduce the next movie, what I want to do is just take this opportunity to remind folks that on July 31st of 2019, I reviewed a 2018 movie called Ghostlight, which is a movie that is centered around a band of misfits, also starring Cary Elwes, that takes place in a small town stage theater to put on a production of Macbeth, and they have to take care around the superstitions of the play, for the curse may yet be real. A Haunting in Cawdor, 2015. A band of misfits alongside Cary Elwes work at a small town stage theater to put on a production of Macbeth, taking care around the superstitions of the play, for the curse may yet be real. Yeah, there's two of these. So this was directed by Phil Wurtzel, and it's a totally different movie than Ghostlight. Different premise, but it still strikes a lot of the same bullet point beats. I actually thought I was kind of going a little bit crazy here. The reason that I picked this movie was because it had only 82 views on Letterboxd, and it does star Cary Elwes, who I love. I am fully on board with saying that I am a Cary Elwes fan, so I saw the opportunity, hey, it's another horror movie, and it only has 82 views. Let's dive in. And then it started, and it's taking place at the Cawdor Barn Theater, which director of Phil Wurtzel wound up making a documentary about this real place in Cawdor, the Barn Theater, and I have a feeling what happened is he loved this theater so much that he ended up writing a movie about it, centered around it, which, you know, if that was misguided, I don't know, time will tell. Aaron Sorkin said that if you're wanting to write a screenplay and what you're focused on more than anything else is the place, then that makes more of a TV series than a movie. Regardless, moving on. But I was watching it, they're putting on Macbeth. It's a small town play. Carrie Owens is in it, and they're avoiding the superstitions, and I thought I was just going a little bit bonkers, a little bit Looney Tunes. I'm like, I've been here before. This is such a strange sensation for me. It kind of makes me think that, okay, Ghostlight came after this, 3 years after this, and I would think that Carrie Owens in particular, when making Ghostlight, would at least raise his hand and say, 3 years ago, we kind of did this. Again, it's not a direct remake. The characters are totally different. The motivations are totally different. And in this case, this has a group of young individuals that are on their last stages of incarceration. They're basically getting ready for probation.
Now, as you probably surmised, this place is not like any other camp. In fact, we don't even like to call it a camp. The state does mandate that we run it like one. I won't lie to you, tough chores ahead, and you will need to continue your GED studies while under our supervision.
So it is very different. Just like I said, the bullet point beats are so similar that I can't really ignore it. I have to give some mention that there were two of these movies. And unfortunately, of the two movies, I would have to say that Ghostlight was significantly better. It wasn't a great movie, but it was significantly better than this, which unfortunately I would have to say is an outright bad film. And unfortunately, that comes down to mostly the acting performances. Aside from Carrie Owens, who was the outlier in this, but all of the acting performances of the main characters here were unfortunately lifeless and boring with very poor dialogue execution. That's one thing that's really difficult for a fledgling filmmaker, especially a small budget film, to pull off with actors that don't have a lot of experience under their belt, is natural dialogue. Being able to talk to one another without looking like you're remembering lines, but actually just having a conversation. And that it really just couldn't pull off in this one. The dialogue itself, as it was written, wasn't terrible. It wasn't great. It probably could have done with a lot of revisions and brush-ups. But ultimately what it came down to was the performances themselves delivering the dialogue. It was very stilted. It was very unnatural. And that really took me out of the movie because that was a huge portion of this. And the other thing I want to do is just, without getting spoilery, what I want to say is that this had a big twist reveal. And honestly, this big twist reveal was broadcast with a megaphone 30 seconds into this fucking movie. And ultimately what it wound up doing was, it's like, and it just kept kind of peppering it into the movie, kept going. We have a scene with this, and finally, by the time it got to the end and they did the big reveal, what it was kind of almost the cinematic equivalent of a poor comedian giving his punchline and saying, "You get it? You get it? We got it." It just wasn't executed very well. And so with the score of 31 out of 100 points, I unfortunately cannot recommend 2015's A Haunting in Cawdor. But if you do like the idea of this movie, you might want to give a try for 2018's Ghostlight. So that should about do it. That is 5 horror movies you probably have never heard of. I look forward to seeing you on my next video. If you like this, please click like and subscribe, or hit that bell, whatever the fuck that means anymore. But I don't know, maybe it'll help. If you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.